Hi everybody, it's Birdie with My Favorite Quilt Store. I'm back talking with you about the Nutty quilt. Wanted to share some progress. I've got 32 of my 42 acorn blocks and I've put a bunch on the wall for you to look at. Having lots of fun. I hope you are too. And I wanted you to know that when I put these together now, I don't have to trace my diagonal lines anymore because I've been pretty good at eyeballing it, and I think that makes things go a little bit faster. I hope you're having similar success. But the next thing that I wanted to talk to you about today regarding this quilt is piecing this really good looking border here. So I've got a partial one put together, but before we show how to put it together, we want to talk about the units that you're using to make each of these leaf things. So you've got a 3 by 2.5 inch rectangle. Then you've got a 2-inch square here and a 1-inch square here and here. And you've got to make a left-facing one and then a right-facing one. And what I did when I was doing that is I made all of the left side first, and then I went back and made all of the right side, because a couple of times I started to get confused as to where I was placing my pieces before I started sewing. So I didn't want to keep doing that. So like I said, I just made all of the left side first, and then I went back and made the right side. So the next thing you do is you want to start sewing the pieces together. They ask that you put a 3 by 1 inch rectangle at the bottom and at the top of each border that you make. And then in between each of these is a 3 by 1.5 inch. So they want you to sew, you're going to sew the whole left side together. You have that 3 by 1 down at the bottom, your left side leaf, and then a 3 by 1.5, and you sew them all together. And I've decided in my quilt that I'm following their guidelines for fabric placement, meaning I like their layout, how they had the colors done, so that's what I followed. And then after you've got that left side all done, then you'll go back and sew the right side, and then you've got this stem that runs down the middle of it. And this is only a 1-inch strip after you piece your 1-inch strips together, and it tells you exactly what size to cut them. For the side borders, you're cutting them at 72.5 inches, and for the top and the bottom borders, it's 60.5. So the tricky part about that, you're going to sew it, like I sewed my left side first to this green strip. And then I noticed when I was doing some piecing, the tricky part is to make sure that you get these pieces lined up when you sew the right side to that strip. So I was going through and I was on my wrong side of my fabric. When I pin it, I want to make sure, because you know all your sewing's not perfect, you know. You want to make sure that you line that up, and when you're done, you want to make sure that these are matching. You don't want this one to be a little bit higher. It looks a lot better. The idea is to get these to go straight like this, straight across. So like I even went through and I was even marking in my seam allowance exactly where to place these. That's going to be probably the trickiest part about putting this all together. And I was worried because when I make a quilt, I don't usually cut my border pieces until I have my inner quilt top all sewn together, because sometimes the way I sew, it doesn't come out exactly the way the measurements say in the quilt. But the way there's a fix for that when you're making this quilt. That's why they've given you this 1-inch strip down here. And if for some reason yours is either too long or too short, you'll be able to make your little bit of an adjustment when you put in your border onto your quilt back, your quilt top, I should say. If it's not matching up perfectly, you've got some playroom. And I think that's the reason that they did this, because you'll see that you've got that 1 inch down here and you've got it at both ends, and that gives you a little bit of wiggle room to make sure your border fits on there pretty snugly, because you don't want a border with waves in it. You want to keep your quilt top as flat as possible when you go. So I've got another, I wanted you to see, this is how far that I've done this border. And then I've got all these other little pieces for because this is a top border, and then I've already sewn all of these together for the bottom border as well. So that's again, you're using small pieces again, this 1-inch square here, but it's just a matter of, and like I said, if you do all the left side first and then the right side, to me it's less confusing, and once you get going with your chain stitching, you'll get it done pretty quick. The other thing that I wanted to talk about this week is making these cornerstones. These are, I love the idea that they did with these cornerstones. They've got you're starting with a 3.5-inch square here, and you've got 1.5 here and here, so that's the first thing you're doing, and you'll make this square here. And then you're taking a 3.5-inch by 1 inch, and you're sewing this piece, another 3.5-inch by, I think it's like 3 inches. So you've got that, and you piece it together, and so you're going to make 4 of these. It's the corner unit, and that'll be you'll see in your placement chart how it turns out, looking like a cute little, and this whole thing will run together, and it'll piece together very, very nicely. So that's where we're at now, and hopefully you'll catch up with me, or maybe some of you are already ahead of me. The next time that I visit with you on this quilt, we're going to talk about putting the sashing in here, and placement of all your acorns and everything, because I decided to do my own colorway on the acorns. I mixed it up a little bit, so you'll get to, hopefully you have a design wall when you get to that point, and you can work on your color placement when we start to put the whole quilt together. So that's where we're at. I hope you're having as much fun making this quilt as I am. I'll talk to you next month.